Ancient supercities rose from riverbeds, not by chance, but by design. The true foundation of their power flowed just beneath the streets in vast, hidden water networks. You will learn the secret blueprint that allowed empires to thrive in the most unlikely places. How did a city in the desert become a bustling metropolis? What happens when a civilization's lifeblood suddenly runs dry? By the end, you will see the ancient world not as a collection of ruins, but as a masterclass in harnessing nature's most vital resource. What single force do you think truly builds a civilization? The first farmers faced a simple, brutal equation. Rains failed, crops withered, and survival became a gamble. Then a revolutionary idea took root. What if they could command the water itself, moving it from the river to their fields on demand? This was the moment civilization pivoted, transforming from scattered villages into a force of nature. Historian Carl Wittfogel called this the dawn of hydraulic civilization, a profound shift where the management of water on a massive scale forged entirely new structures of power. To build a canal, to erect a dam, required the coordinated labor of thousands. This collective effort demanded organizers, overseers, and ultimately rulers. A centralized authority emerged not from conquest alone, but from the practical necessity of managing a shared resource. The supercities that followed were not accidental neighbors to rivers. They were colossal machines engineered to exploit the flow, their very streets and foundations acting as components in a vast, life-sustaining system. This was the original blueprint for empire, a symbiotic dance between human ambition and the relentless current. And nowhere was this blueprint executed with more breathtaking precision than in the heart of the Mesopotamian desert. Mohenjo-Daro rises from the Indus Plain as a monument to foresight. Its wide, straight streets were laid out in a perfect grid, a pattern so modern it feels out of place in the ancient world. But beneath those orderly streets lay the city's true genius, a hidden network of drains and channels that rivaled the complexity of the city above. This was a civilization that did not just live near a river, it engineered its entire existence around the flow of water. The Indus River and its tributaries, whose ancient courses are now lost to time, provided the lifeblood, but the people of Mohenjo-Daro built the heart and veins. They dug countless wells to reach fresh groundwater, constructed the monumental Great Bath as a center for ritual and community, and designed the world's first comprehensive urban sewer system. Every house was connected, with wastewater channeled seamlessly away from homes and into covered drains that lined the main avenues. This was about more than just cleanliness, it was a profound system of control. By managing water with such precision, the rulers could ensure public health, prevent disease, and maintain order for a population that may have reached 40,000 souls. Even the city's architecture bowed to the river's power. The entire settlement was built on massive mud brick platforms, and a towering citadel overlooked the streets, not just as a symbol of authority, but as a practical defense against the Indus's unpredictable floods. They understood the river's dual nature, its capacity to give life and to take it away, and this makes their eventual decline all the more poignant. The very rivers that sustained this supercity for centuries may have been its undoing, as shifting courses or prolonged droughts slowly strangled its water supply. The silent, empty streets of Mohenjo-Daro stand as a haunting testament to a delicate balance lost, a masterpiece of hydraulic engineering ultimately defeated by the forces it sought to master. Yet this was only the beginning. As one civilization grappled with the secrets of river water, another was preparing to scale that ambition to an almost unimaginable level. The sun-baked plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers presented a paradox. This was a land of brutal heat and dry winds, yet its soil was some of the most fertile on earth, a gift of silt deposited by the twin rivers. The challenge was not the soil itself, but commanding the water that brought it to life. The world's first true supercities, Uruk and did not simply appear here by chance. They were willed into existence by an audacious act of engineering, a sprawling network of canals that turned a hostile environment into the legendary cradle of civilization. These canals were far more than simple ditches for irrigation. They were the arteries of the empire, massive public works that demanded the coordinated labor of thousands, all directed by a powerful, centralized authority. The priesthood and monarchy did not just rule the people, they ruled the water. They decided who received it and when, transforming seasonal floods into a predictable, year-round agricultural machine. This control over water allocation was the ultimate source of their power. A single season surplus from the irrigated fields could fund grand temples, equip vast armies, and inspire monumental art. The connection between water and power was so fundamental that it was etched into law. The Code of Hammurabi, one of humanity's oldest legal documents, contains specific laws governing water usage. Farmers were held responsible for maintaining their section of the canal bank, and negligence that flooded a neighbor's field came with severe financial penalties. This was not just about property rights, it was about preserving the very system that held society together. This hydraulic network enabled population densities and cultural achievements previously unimaginable, creating the world's first urban explosion. Yet, this reliance on engineered waterways created a profound vulnerability. Canals could be sabotaged. Upstream cities could divert the flow, leaving downstream rivals to wither. Wars were fought not just for land or treasure, but for water rights. The very system that built the supercity also made it a target, locking these early empires into a perpetual struggle for control over their liquid lifeline. This legacy of turning a desert into a garden through sheer human will would not be forgotten. It flowed directly, centuries later, into the hands of another desert empire that would refine this ancient blueprint to an even finer degree. While the Mesopotamians wrestled with volatile rivers, Egypt enjoyed a profoundly different relationship with its water source. The Nile was not a force to be tamed so much as a benevolent rhythm to be embraced. Its annual flood was the planet's most reliable metronome, a predictable surge that painted the narrow river valley with a fresh layer of black, life-giving silt each year. This created a world defined by two colors: the Kemet, or black land of the fertile floodplain, and the Desert, the red land of the endless desert that pressed in on all sides. Egyptian civilization existed as a thin, vibrant ribbon of green, utterly dependent on the Nile's generous and consistent pulse. Their mastery was not about conquering the river, but about learning its dance. They engineered an elegant system of basin irrigation, a network of earthen walls that captured the floodwaters as they receded, holding the precious moisture in place long enough to saturate the soil for the planting season. This was a low-tech marvel of water management that turned the entire Nile Valley into a single, productive farm. At the heart of this system was a vital tool of prediction, the Nilometer. These were stone staircases or marked columns descending into the river, allowing priests to measure the flood height with precision. The reading was more than just data, it was a forecast of the kingdom's future. A perfect flood meant a bumper harvest, full granaries, and a happy populace. A low flood promised famine and unrest, while an excessively high one could wipe out villages. This direct link between the river's behavior and the state's stability placed the pharaoh in a role that was both political and divine. He was the intermediary between the people and the gods of the Nile, the one responsible for ensuring the inundation arrived. His power was literally measured by the water level. This sacred duty mobilized the entire society. The surplus food grown from that managed water is what fed the armies of laborers who raised the pyramids at Giza and built the monumental temples of Thebes. It was a hydraulic society built on harmony with a single, predictable source. But what happens when a civilization cannot rely on a single, generous river? What kind of water network must you build when your environment offers no such easy gifts? Our journey now takes us to a civilization that faced this exact challenge, one that turned water scarcity into an empire's greatest strength. While Egypt's civilization flourished along a single, predictable river, the Persian Empire faced a far more unforgiving landscape. Its heart was the vast, arid plateau of Iran, a land where surface water was a fleeting treasure. Here, survival demanded a different kind of genius, one that worked not with the river's flow, but against the very dryness of the earth. The solution was not built upward, but downward, in a hidden web of tunnels known as the Qanat. For over 3,000 years, these silent, subterranean highways have carried the gift of life across the desert. The system's brilliance lay in its elegant simplicity. It began with a mother well, dug deep into the foothills of a mountain until it tapped a hidden aquifer. From there, builders would carve a gently sloping tunnel, just large enough for a person to crawl through, that stretched for miles across the plain. This slight downward grade was the system's engine, allowing gravity to pull the water effortlessly to its destination without a single pump. From the surface, the only signs of this hidden network were lines of craters, the access shafts that provided air for the diggers, and a way to remove debris during construction and maintenance. These shafts, dotting the landscape like a trail of giant anthills, marked the path of an invisible river flowing beneath the sand. This technology was nothing short of revolutionary. It enabled the founding of supercities like Persepolis in locations that would otherwise have been completely uninhabitable. Vast agricultural oases bloomed in the desert, supporting large populations and fueling trade along the legendary Silk Road. The social impact of the Qanat was as profound as its engineering. In many communities, the water it delivered was a shared resource, with rights and allocation times managed communally by the farmers who depended on it. This created a powerful, local form of democracy centered on water, yet this communal benefit was balanced by an immense requirement for social order. Digging and maintaining a Qanat was a dangerous, generations-long undertaking that demanded specialized knowledge and the coordinated labor of an entire community. This necessity forged a society built on deep technical skill and intricate cooperation, a civilization whose strength was quite literally rooted in the ground. The Persian Qanat stands as a masterwork of adaptation, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of environmental scarcity. And this powerful idea of moving water across impossible distances would not remain underground for long, as another empire, famed for its own engineering marvels, would soon learn its secrets and raise the concept to an even grander scale. Those iconic stone arches bridging valleys are more than just ruins. They are the literal backbone of an empire's ambition. Rome did not simply settle near water, it commanded water to come to it. This was hydraulic engineering on a staggering, almost arrogant scale. While earlier civilizations mastered their local rivers or tapped underground sources, the Romans looked at entire mountain ranges and declared them potential water sources for a city dozens of miles away. The system was a masterpiece of gravity-fed logic. Water would be captured from a pristine spring high in the hills, then channeled through a continuous, gentle decline. It flowed through stone conduits, across towering arcades when it needed to cross a valley, through tunnels carved through solid rock, and even through pressurized lead pipes in inverted siphons that forced water up and over smaller obstacles. The Aqua Pier, the first of these monumental projects, was a largely underground channel, a hidden workhorse. But later aqueducts like the Aqua Claudia were built as soaring, defiant monuments above ground, their very visibility a constant reminder of imperial power. The volume of water they delivered is almost incomprehensible. By the height of the empire, 11 major aqueducts were pumping an estimated 300 million gallons of water into Rome every single day. This was not a resource for mere survival. It was the lifeblood of urban spectacle. This water cascaded into magnificent public baths, complexes that were social hubs, gymnasiums, and libraries all in one. It gushed from countless street fountains, ensuring even the poorest citizens had access to clean water. It flushed the city's sophisticated public latrines, where sanitation was a communal experience. And of course, it flowed in abundance into the private villas of the wealthy, supplying ornate gardens and private pools. The state controlled this entire system through a powerful official, the curator aquarum, who decided where the water went. Access was a direct reflection of social standing. The elite had private taps, while the masses relied on public distribution. This constant, managed flow did more than just prevent thirst. It allowed Rome to achieve a population density and a standard of public health that would not be seen again in Europe for over 1,000 years. The aqueduct was the ultimate expression of an empire that bent nature to its will, creating a supercity in a location that logic said should never have supported one. Yet this monumental, above-ground approach represents only one way to solve the water equation. Far across the world, another civilization was weaving a water network of breathtaking complexity, one that worked with the land rather than towering over it. While Roman engineers bridged valleys with stone, another civilization was building a metropolis not across water but directly from it. The Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan was a city of impossible beauty, a web of shimmering canals and vibrant green islands that seemed to float upon Lake Texcoco. At the heart of this aquatic wonder were the Chinampas, the so-called floating gardens that formed the city's agricultural soul. These were not magical floating rafts, but feats of meticulous engineering. To build one, workers would stake out a long, narrow rectangle in the shallow lakebed using woven reed fences. They then layered the enclosure with mud scooped from the lake bottom and rich, decaying aquatic plants, building up a fertile, raised plot of land anchored by the deep roots of willow trees planted along its edges. The result was a garden bed perpetually saturated with nutrient-rich water, a self-irrigating system that could yield up to 7 harvests a single year. The canals between these plots were the city's lifeblood, serving as highways for canoes, sources for fish and waterfowl, and a constant source of moisture. But the Aztecs faced a critical problem. The lake was brackish, a mix of fresh and salt water that could poison their crops. Their solution was a masterpiece of hydrological management. They constructed massive dikes or causeways to separate the freshwater springs from the saltier parts of the lake. They even built an ambitious, double-terraced aqueduct, engineered by the famed poet King Nezahualcoyotl, to bring fresh spring water directly into the city center. This was not a city that simply used its water source. It was a city that had become one with its water source, a perfectly integrated system of urban living, agriculture, and transportation. When the Spanish conquistadors first gazed upon Tenochtitlan, they were astounded, reporting a city more magnificent than Venice, a place where the very streets were made of water. This New World ingenuity presents a fascinating parallel to a different kind of water mastery, one found on the other side of the world where control was not about conquering nature, but about honoring its sacred rhythm. Deep within the Cambodian jungle, the stone faces of Angkor Wat gaze out from a lost world. But the temples were merely the spectacular heart of something far larger, a sprawling, low-density metropolis that was, in its essence, a colossal machine for managing water. The true genius of Angkor lay not in its carved sandstone, but in its intricate, earth-built web of canals, reservoirs, and moats. This entire urban complex was designed as a single, vast catchment system to capture every drop of the precious monsoon rains. The scale of this ambition is almost impossible to overstate. At its center lay the West Barre, an artificial reservoir so immense it stretches 8 kilometers long and 2.5 kilometers wide. Imagine a vast inland sea built entirely by human hands, a battery storing enough water to sustain the city through the long, punishing dry season. This stored water was then released through a network of canals to irrigate thousands of acres of rice paddies. It was this engineered agricultural abundance, this reliable rice surplus, that fed the enormous population and provided the labor force to build the breathtaking temples that still awe us today. For centuries, we could only guess at the true extent of this hydraulic city, its boundaries obscured by dense jungle. But recent LiDAR technology, which uses lasers to map the ground beneath the canopy, has pulled back the veil. The scans revealed a sprawling urban landscape far larger than anyone had dreamed, with its water network acting as the city's literal circulatory system, with canals as arteries and reservoirs as hearts. Yet this brilliant complexity may have also contained the seeds of its downfall. Some scholars argue the system became a victim of its own success, growing so vast and interconnected that it became brittle. A series of severe droughts followed by catastrophic monsoon failures could have overwhelmed the delicate balance, causing the entire network to falter. The very engineering that built the supercity may have made it uniquely vulnerable to a changing climate. Angkor stands as a powerful parallel to the aqueducts of Rome, a testament to a global pattern where water management was the undeniable foundation of power. But controlling water was never just a practical matter. In these ancient worlds, to command the flow of a river was to touch the divine itself, weaving the practical and the sacred into an unbreakable bond of authority. The flow of water was never just a matter of engineering, it was a profound language of power. To command a river was to speak with the voice of the gods themselves. This sacred symbolism transformed every canal, every aqueduct, from a simple piece of infrastructure into a declaration of divine right. In Egypt, the pharaoh was not merely a political leader, he was the guarantor of the Nile's annual miracle. His rituals and offerings were believed to be essential for the flood's arrival, making him the indispensable link between the people and the gods of the river. A bountiful harvest was proof of his divine favor, a drought was a sign of his failure. This gave his rule a spiritual authority that was almost unshakable. Across the desert in Mesopotamia, kings adopted the title of shepherd, but they were shepherds of water as much as people. By maintaining the vast canal networks, they positioned themselves as the protectors of civilization against the chaos of drought and flood. Their power was visibly demonstrated every time a farmer's field was irrigated, a direct result of the state's organized labor. The Roman approach was perhaps the most theatrical. Their soaring aqueducts were not hidden away, they were monumental advertisements of imperial might. They marched across the landscape as stone testaments to an empire that could bring mountains to a city. The water that gushed from countless public fountains was a daily, free performance of the emperor's generosity. Even the public baths were more than just places to get clean. They were grand social institutions where the hierarchy of Roman society was on full display, all made possible by the state's controlled abundance of water. This symbolic power had very real, tangible consequences. The ability to provide water justified the collection of taxes, often paid in grain grown from that very water. It could unite fractious regions under a single ruler who promised stability and abundance. Conversely, the power to withhold water from a rebellious city was a weapon more devastating than any siege engine. When you look at these ancient hydraulic wonders now, see them not just as ruins, but as the ancient world's most persuasive political campaign. They were built to last, yes, but more importantly, they were built to convince. They whispered a simple, powerful message to every citizen: your life, your food, your very world flows from the hands of your ruler. The silent stones of an aqueduct tell only half the story. Behind every mile of canal and every subterranean tunnel was a symphony of human effort, a colossal mobilization of muscle and mind. To build a single Roman aqueduct or a Persian Qanat was to command an army of laborers, not for a season, but for generations. The sheer scale of this workforce is staggering to contemplate. Thousands of workers, from engineers and surveyors to diggers and masons, had to be assembled, fed, housed, and directed with unwavering precision. This was not a spontaneous gathering. It was a profound exercise in social power, almost always orchestrated by a centralized state or a dominant religious institution. The most common tool for this mobilization was corvée labor, a system of compulsory service where citizens were required to donate a set number of days each year to public works. Armies of soldiers were often redirected from conquest to construction, and in many societies, slaves provided the brutal, unending physical labor. The true marvel, however, was not just the raw manpower, but the administrative genius required to manage it. Someone had to plan the supply chains for food and water for the workers themselves. Someone had to design the temporary housing, manage the tools, and coordinate the specialized teams. This logistical operation was an engineering feat of its own, a testament to a level of bureaucratic organization we rarely associate with the ancient world. And this created a powerful, self-perpetuating cycle. The entire endeavor was fueled by the agricultural surplus made possible by earlier, simpler water systems. That surplus of grain fed the thousands of laborers who were then digging the new canals or building the new reservoirs. These new, grander systems would, in turn, create an even larger agricultural surplus, which could feed an even bigger city and fund the next, even more ambitious mega-project. This feedback loop of labor and reward was the true engine of ancient urban growth, a cycle where water built the workforce that built the water systems that built the empire. This intricate dance between resource management and human mobilization reveals a deeper truth, one that moves beyond the stones and channels and into the very heart of ancient economics. This economic powerhouse did not run on gold or silver, but on water. The vast hidden river networks were the true financial engines of every supercity, circulating life and wealth through three vital sectors. First and most fundamental was agriculture. Reliable irrigation transformed unpredictable floodplains into breadbaskets, generating food surpluses on a scale once unimaginable. This single achievement changed everything. For the first time in human history, not every member of a society had to farm to eat. This surplus liberated a portion of the population, allowing them to become specialized artisans crafting pottery and tools, soldiers defending the state, and administrators managing the complex bureaucracy of empire. The entire social pyramid, from the pharaoh down to the lowliest scribe, was built upon a foundation of managed water and the grain it produced. The second economic driver was trade, and here the waterways served as the ancient world's freight trains. Moving heavy goods like quarried stone for temples or timber for construction over land was a slow, expensive, and back-breaking endeavor. But a single barge, pulled by the current of a river or the steady draft of a canal, could carry the equivalent of hundreds of donkey carts. This cheap, efficient transport connected remote hinterlands to bustling urban ports, creating integrated economies that stretched for hundreds of miles. Grain from the Egyptian countryside could feed the workers at the Giza Plateau, while luxury goods from upriver could stock the markets of Mohenjo-Daro, all thanks to this liquid highway. Finally, water itself became a direct source of industrial power. While less common than in later centuries, there is evidence of water wheels being used to mill grain and even to operate simple machinery for tasks like crushing ore or fulling cloth. This was the beginning of hydropower, another thread in the intricate tapestry of water-based economics. This entire integrated system, from the irrigated field to the trade canal to the water-driven mill, generated the concentrated wealth necessary for everything we associate with a supercity. It paid for the pyramids and the Parthenon, it equipped the legions and the pharaoh's armies, and it funded the poets, artists, and philosophers whose work still defines our understanding of civilization. A city's economic dominance was not a matter of luck, it was a direct measure of its hydrological mastery. And this mastery relied on a toolkit of ingenious inventions, the clever devices that turned a river's potential into an empire's reality. The precision of these water highways was a victory of the mind long before it was a triumph of muscle. Ancient engineers, armed with little more than simple tools and profound geometric insight, performed what amounted to magic, convincing water to flow for dozens of miles using nothing but gravity. The Roman chorobates, a wooden table nearly 20 feet long with a central water channel, allowed builders to establish a perfectly level line across rugged landscapes. The required gradient for an aqueduct was astonishingly slight, a drop of perhaps 1 foot in every 1,500. Maintaining this gentle slope over 50 miles, through hills and across valleys, was an act of surveying genius that modern engineers still admire. In Mesopotamia, the task was different but no less complex. Surveyors used ropes knotted at precise intervals and wooden pegs to lay out the long, straight lines of irrigation canals, calculating the necessary fall from the river to the distant fields with geometric principles that would later be formalized by the Greeks. Perhaps the most demanding test of all belonged to the Qanat builders. From the mother well, dug deep into a mountainside, they had to carve a tunnel that descended at a perfectly uniform slope, just enough to keep the water moving but not so steep as to cause erosion that would collapse the tunnel. They used simple plumb bobs and sighting staffs, aligning them in the dim subterranean light to maintain a course that might stretch for 10 miles or more. A single miscalculation meant the water would stagnate or the tunnel would fail, wasting a generation's labor. This sacred knowledge of gradients and flows was not written in books but held in the minds of master craftsmen, passed from father to son within closed guilds. To possess this art was to hold the key to life itself, the power to turn a barren plain into a kingdom's breadbasket. Yet, such precise control over a vital resource could not exist in a legal vacuum. The same society that mastered the physics of water had to invent the laws to govern its use. A river's flow could unite a civilization, but its scarcity could tear it apart. With the power to command water came the absolute necessity to control it, not just with canals and aqueducts, but with the written word. The world's first legal codes were, in many ways, the world's first water regulations. Inscribed on his famous stone stele, the Code of Hammurabi laid out very clear consequences for hydraulic negligence. If a farmer was careless in maintaining his section of the canal bank, and his laziness caused a breach that flooded his neighbor's field, he was required to repay his neighbor in grain for the entire lost crop. This was not a suggestion, it was a legal mandate. Water theft, the act of secretly diverting a channel to benefit your own plot at the expense of another's, was treated as a serious crime against the community. The law recognized that a single individual's actions could undermine the entire system that fed the city. Centuries later and a continent away, Roman jurists developed an even more intricate body of water law. The Roman state declared all flowing water a public resource, a res publici, but its distribution was anything but equal. An elaborate set of rights defined who could tap an aqueduct and for what purpose. Polluting a public water source or illegally tapping the conduit that fed a city was not just a finnable offense, it could be punished by exile or even death. The state's need to protect its hydraulic lifeblood was that absolute. At their core, these ancient laws served two profound purposes. The first was straightforward conflict resolution, a way to settle disputes between farmers without them resorting to violence. But the second, and perhaps more insidious, was the codification of social hierarchy. The law consistently privileged the needs of the state and the estates of the elite over the small plots of common farmers. A senator's right to fill his ornate garden fountains was legally protected, while a village's access to a stream could be revoked for a state project. This legal framework turned water from a communal gift of nature into a commodity, a tool of political control. When these laws failed, the consequences were catastrophic. Disputes over water rights between upstream and downstream Sumerian city-states repeatedly flared into full-scale wars, proving that a shared river could be as much a source of conflict as a bond of union. The development of water law was a critical, unsung revolution. It created the formal structure that allowed a supercity to function, a legal backbone for the physical infrastructure we so often admire. But for all its power, this legal and engineering mastery could not ultimately save these civilizations from a far more formidable adversary. Their greatest strength concealed a fatal flaw. A supercity built on water is only as resilient as its source. A prolonged drought, a shift in the monsoon, a river that simply changed its course, and the entire intricate machine would begin to seize. The Akkadian Empire, one of the world's first great empires, likely met its end not by invasion, but by a 300-year mega-drought. Their sophisticated canal networks, so brilliant in times of plenty, stretched across a landscape that was slowly turning to dust. The water just stopped coming. We see this pattern etched into the ruins of Maya cities in Central America, where elaborate reservoir systems were designed to capture every drop of seasonal rain. When those rains failed for generations, the reservoirs became empty stone bowls, and the jungle reclaimed the plazas and temples. Even the magnificent system at Angkor, a masterpiece of hydraulic engineering, may have been a victim of its own complexity. A series of intense droughts followed by catastrophic floods could have overwhelmed its delicate balance, silting up the canals and reservoirs until the entire network became a liability instead of an asset. But sometimes the collapse came not from a lack of water, but from its very application. In Mesopotamia, the constant irrigation that made the desert bloom had a hidden, toxic consequence. As water evaporated under the fierce sun, it left behind minute salt crystals that slowly accumulated in the soil. Over centuries, this salinization poisoned the land, causing wheat yields to plummet by nearly 2/3. The fields that had fed empires were turning white, as if covered in a shroud of frost. The source of their power had become the instrument of their undoing. This is the sobering lesson written in the dust and salt of these fallen cities. No dam was high enough, no canal long enough to hold back the larger forces of a changing world. Their fate forces a question upon us, one that echoes far beyond the ancient world. What happens when the environment upon which a civilization is perfectly engineered suddenly decides to change the rules? A silent drought recorded in a tube of mud can rewrite history. This is the new frontier of archaeology, where the secrets of ancient water are no longer buried just in stone, but in soil, pollen, and laser light. Modern technology is peeling back the layers of time to reveal the true scale and sophistication of these hydraulic landscapes. Take LiDAR, for instance. This remarkable tool works by firing millions of laser pulses from an aircraft. When these pulses hit the ground, they bounce back, creating a precise, three-dimensional map of the surface below. In places like the jungles of Cambodia or Guatemala, LiDAR acts like an X-ray, seeing straight through the dense canopy to expose the ghostly footprints of civilization. What appears as an impenetrable green wilderness from the ground is revealed from above as a sprawling gridwork of canals, reservoirs, and raised causeways. We are not just finding lost temples, we are finding the skeletal remains of entire water-managed cities. But the evidence does not only come from the air. Scientists drill deep into the beds of ancient lakes, pulling up long cylinders of sediment known as cores. These cores are like a climate diary, with each layer representing a year. By analyzing the pollen and chemical composition trapped in the mud, researchers can read a detailed history of the environment. A layer rich in tree pollen suggests a wet, thriving period, while a sudden shift to dust and scrub pollen tells a story of prolonged drought. We can now match these climatic records with the archaeological timeline, seeing with startling clarity how a megadrought directly preceded the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, or how monsoon failures strained the vast reservoirs of Angkor. Even the humble irrigation canal has a story to tell. The silt that accumulated at the bottom of these channels holds clues to the agricultural intensity of a society. A thick, rapid buildup of sediment suggests the land was heavily farmed and vulnerable to erosion. Meanwhile, within the cities themselves, the analysis of water-lane sediments can map the ancient flow of water through neighborhoods, showing us where the public fountains were and how wastewater was channeled away. Every shard of pottery found in a canal bed, every layer of soil, is a vital piece of evidence. This is a massive, global detective story, and each clue helps us reconstruct the brilliant, complex, and ultimately fragile hydrological machines that these supercities truly were. Yet, for all this technological insight, one mystery remains deeply human. We can map their canals and trace their droughts, but can we ever truly hear the voices of the millions who moved the earth and carved the stone? The true pulse of these supercities was not found in the palace or the temple, but along the muddy banks of its canals. For the millions who called these places home, water was the rhythm of daily existence. A child's world was defined by the irrigation ditch where they learned to swim, their games played under the watchful eyes of mothers washing clothes in the same current that watered the fields. The air hummed with a soundtrack of flowing water, a constant murmur in the streets of Rome, and a gentle lapping against the Chinampas of Tenochtitlan. This was a life deeply intertwined with the hydraulic machine, where the state's grand design translated into the simple, repetitive tasks of survival. A farmer's entire year was dictated by the scheduled release of water into his field, his family's fate tied to the efficiency of a distant bureaucrat. In Persia, a community's survival depended on the shared, dangerous work of maintaining the Qanat, a collective responsibility that forged powerful local bonds. In Rome, the public baths were not merely for cleaning, but the social heart of the city, where citizens of all classes gathered to talk, exercise, and conduct business amidst the steam and flowing pools. Yet this intimate connection to water also laid bare the stark divisions of ancient life. The privileged elite enjoyed private taps channeling fresh aqueduct water directly into their villas, filling ornate fountains and garden pools. For the common citizen, however, water was a public and often precarious resource. They queued at street fountains, carrying heavy jars back to cramped apartments, and always faced the risk of relying on a source downstream from the city's waste, where contamination was a constant, invisible threat. This inequality was engineered into the system itself, a daily reminder that the empire's lifeblood was allocated by status. To see these cities only as feats of engineering is to miss their soul. They were living organisms, their vitality measured not just in cubic meters of water delivered, but in the splash of a child's feet and the shared gossip at a well. This tangible, sensory relationship with the source of life stands in profound contrast to our own modern experience, where a turn of a tap delivers a mystery, the river's journey from mountain to metropolis completely hidden from view. A deep philosophical divide runs beneath the water channels of the ancient world. In the West, from Mesopotamia to Rome, the prevailing attitude was one of conquest. Their engineering was a declaration of war against nature, a battle to be won with sheer force and scale. They built massive levees to constrain unruly rivers, dug vast canals to redirect their courses, and erected soaring aqueducts that marched across valleys in a blatant assertion of human will. This was water commanded, a resource to be seized and transported in a display of imperial power that was meant to be seen and admired. But travel east to ancient China, and you find a completely different mindset at work. Here, the goal was not to conquer a river, but to collaborate with it. The magnificent Duzhongyan irrigation system, still in use after more than 2,000 years, is the ultimate expression of this philosophy. Instead of blocking the powerful Min River with a dam, Chinese engineers devised an elegant solution. They constructed a levee to gently split the water, a spillway to divert excess flow during floods, and a channel to carry a controlled amount of water to the arid plains. This system works like a partner with the river, guiding its energy rather than fighting it. This fundamental difference in approach between domination and harmony shaped everything. The Roman state demonstrated its power by bringing distant water to the city, a top-down allocation that reinforced social hierarchies. In China, a system like Duzhongyan required a deep, ongoing understanding of the river's natural behavior, fostering a relationship built on observation and adaptation. One approach shouts its authority from towering stone arches, while the other whispers its wisdom through a seamless integration with the landscape. This contrast reveals that there was never a single path to hydraulic power, only different answers to the same essential question: how should humanity live with the forces that give it life? To truly grasp the brilliance of this adaptive approach, we need to look at a specific invention that turned a problem into a permanent solution. The true revolution often began with a single farmer and a long wooden pole. While empires built monuments of stone, the daily struggle to feed a supercity was won by humble, ingenious tools like the shaduf. Picture a man standing at the edge of a canal, dipping a bucket into the water. With a gentle push down on the counterweight at the other end of his lever, he effortlessly lifts the full bucket to pour its contents into a ditch leading to a higher field. This simple action, repeated thousands of times a day across a civilization, represented a massive leap in agricultural productivity. The shaduf was democratized hydraulic power, a device so effective and affordable that even a single family could cultivate land once considered too high or too far from the river to be useful. It amplified human strength, turning back breaking labor into manageable work and steadily pushing the green frontier of farmland further into the arid landscape. But for tasks requiring even more volume, another invention turned to a different source of power. The Sakya or Noria was a different kind of beast. This was a large, vertical water wheel, often constructed of wood and powered by a patient ox or donkey walking in a constant circle. As the animal trudged, the wheel turned, and a chain of pots or buckets mounted on its rim dipped into the water source, lifted, and automatically emptied their contents into a channel high above. This was continuous, automated irrigation, a primitive but relentless engine that could feed an entire network of small canals day and night. The Sakya's rhythmic creak became the sound of abundance in the countryside, a mechanical heartbeat that allowed small communities to manage their water with a new level of independence. These tools were the unsung heroes of the ancient world. They were not commissioned by pharaohs or financed by imperial treasuries, but developed and spread through the grassroots needs of countless farmers. This decentralized innovation was just as vital as the grand state canals. The macro infrastructure brought the water to the region, but the micro-technology of the Shaduf and Sakya delivered it to the specific plot, to the very root of the plant. One system was the massive artery, the other was the delicate capillary network, and a civilization needed both to thrive. This blend of top-down ambition and bottom-up ingenuity created a resilient and adaptable hydraulic society, proving that the strength of an empire was built as much by the anonymous farmer at his lever as by the emperor who commanded the river. The invisible architecture of these water empires was built from numbers and the night sky. To command a river, you first had to predict its behavior, a task that turned priest astronomers into the most powerful forecasters in the ancient world. In Egypt, the heliacal rising of the star Sirius, which appeared just before dawn in the middle of July, became the celestial herald of the Nile's life-giving flood. This astronomical event gave the state a critical heads-up, a window of about 2 months to prepare the basin irrigation systems and mobilize labor. The entire agricultural calendar, and by extension the kingdom's economy, was synchronized to this celestial clock. Far to the east, Babylonian mathematicians were solving a more terrestrial problem, the fair and efficient distribution of water. They developed sophisticated formulas to calculate the volume of earth that needed to be excavated for a new canal, allowing for precise project planning and resource allocation. More impressively, they used geometric principles to determine water shares for farmers based on the size and shape of their fields, turning the chaotic potential of water rights into a system of calculable equity. This was bureaucracy powered by mathematics, and of course, the legendary precision of the Roman aqueducts, with their impossibly gentle gradients, would have been impossible without a masterful, practical grasp of geometry and trigonometry. The chorobates, the giant leveling table, was just the physical expression of this abstract knowledge. This intellectual foundation was not public information. It was closely guarded by priestly and scholarly classes, who alone could read the stars and perform the complex calculations. Their unique skills made them indispensable to the state, weaving together religious authority, scientific knowledge, and political power into an unbreakable cord. The calendar, the calculator, and the surveying instrument were, in their own way, as vital to the supercity as the slave and the shovel. They represent a level of sophistication we are only now fully appreciating. Yet, this very appreciation forces us to confront a provocative and deeply controversial idea about the true nature of these hydraulic societies. But did this need for water management inevitably produce a single, brutal form of government? The shadow of Carl Wittfogel's hydraulic hypothesis looms large over this entire story. In his influential book Oriental Despotism, Wittfogel made a sweeping argument. He claimed that the massive, centralized irrigation works of arid lands like Mesopotamia and Egypt created what he called a hydraulic society. This was not just a civilization that used water, but one where the state's absolute control over this vital resource forged an unbreakable tyranny. In his view, the pharaohs and emperors were not just rulers, they were totalitarian managers of a single colossal farm. The need to coordinate thousands of laborers to build and maintain canals, he argued, left no room for democracy or individual rights. It inevitably produced a powerful, top-down bureaucracy that controlled not just water, but every facet of life, from religion to the military. This was a provocative and powerful idea, especially during the Cold War era when it was written, as it seemed to draw a direct line from ancient waterworks to modern totalitarian states. Yet, modern archaeology and historical research have revealed deep cracks in this theory. Scholars now point out its flaws with striking clarity. Wittfogel's model is criticized as environmentally deterministic, suggesting that geography alone dictates a society's political destiny. But we now know of many societies that managed large-scale water systems without developing his brand of rigid despotism. The Indus Valley civilization, with its sophisticated plumbing, shows little evidence of a single, all-powerful ruler or a massive, centralized army. Its cities seem to have been organized more locally. Conversely, history is filled with brutal despots who rose to power in regions with abundant rainfall, where large-scale irrigation was completely unnecessary. The theory also oversimplifies the incredible diversity of these ancient states, forcing them all into a single, rigid box that often reflected the political anxieties of Wittfogel's own time more than it reflected historical reality. So where does that leave his core idea? If we strip away the deterministic and oversimplified layers, a crucial insight remains. Managing water on a civilizational scale does not create one specific type of government, but it absolutely requires and reinforces social complexity. It demands organization, hierarchy, and a system of rules. It creates a foundation of power that can be used by a benevolent king, a council of priests, or a ruthless dictator. The water itself does not dictate the politics, but it provides the stage and the tools for power to be exercised and amplified. This nuanced view is far more powerful than the original hypothesis. It forces us to see water management not as a simple cause of despotism, but as a profound catalyst for social change. And in our modern world, where managing scarce water resources is becoming one of humanity's greatest challenges, understanding this ancient relationship between the flow of water and the structure of power is no longer just academic. It is an urgent lesson written in the dust of fallen empires. The ghost of ancient Rome flows through the concrete channels of the Los Angeles Aqueduct. Our modern megacities are not so different from their ancient predecessors, facing the same fundamental equation of thirst and power. We too have built monumental systems to command distant water, creating a profound vulnerability. The political battles raging over the dwindling Colorado River are not merely policy disputes. They are the direct descendants of conflicts between Sumerian city-states, where upstream users held a knife to the throat of those downstream. The ancient lesson is clear: a water system that fosters conflict is a system built on sand. Yet we are also rediscovering ancient wisdom. Singapore's NE water program, which purifies wastewater to drinking standards, is a high-tech echo of the Persian Qanats principle, maximizing every single drop in a resource-scarce environment. It is the same imperative that drove the builders of Mohenjo-Daro to recycle and manage their water with such precision. The successes and failures of these supercities form a stark ledger for our own time. Their longevity was a product of sustainable management, robust institutions that could maintain infrastructure for centuries, and the flexibility to adapt to a changing climate. Their collapses, from the salinized fields of Mesopotamia to the drought-stricken reservoirs of the Maya, are cautionary tales of what happens when a society overexploits its foundation, or when its political will crumbles just as the environment turns hostile. This is not ancient history, it is a living manual. The same forces that drained the life from Angkor are present in our own world, amplified by our global scale. The past does not offer a simple blueprint to copy, but something far more valuable, a long-term perspective on the consequences of our choices. We are now writing the next chapter of this age-old story, and the same water that carved the paths of empire now tests the resilience of our own. Beneath the sands of the Sahara and the dense soils of the Amazon, entire chapters of the human story with water remain completely hidden. We have mapped the grand aqueducts and the sprawling canals, but what about the subtle, lost systems of the Minoans on Crete, a civilization that thrived for centuries with such sophisticated plumbing that its palaces had terracotta pipes and running water long before the Romans? Their secrets are still not fully understood. The true frontier of this ancient mystery lies not in the ruins we can see, but in the ones we cannot. The next wave of discovery is being led by technologies that act as extensions of our senses. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses deep into the earth, painting a picture of buried canals and foundation lines without a single shovel breaking the ground. It is like giving archaeologists X-ray vision. Even more intimate are the clues locked inside the bones of the people themselves. Isotopic analysis of ancient skeletons can detect subtle changes in diet, revealing the precise moment a population was forced to abandon wheat for a more salt-tolerant crop like barley, a direct signal of irrigation failure and soil salinization happening thousands of years ago. This is environmental history written in human chemistry, and with the ongoing digitization of countless archaeological records, we can now run complex simulations, testing how the water network of Angkor would have handled a 50-year drought or how a change in the Nile's flood height would have rippled through the Egyptian economy. These are not just models, they are time machines. Every application of these tools is a potential key to a lost city, a misunderstood society, or a forgotten adaptation. The quest to map the world's hidden river networks is accelerating, and with each new finding, the story of our past becomes richer, more complex, and more relevant. The silent, flowing logic that built the first supercities is finally beginning to speak. We can no longer see these ancient places as just stone monuments or lists of kings. When you pull all the threads together, from the gridded streets of Mohenjo-Daro to the soaring arcades of Rome, a completely new narrative of the ancient world comes into focus. It is a story written not in stone but in water. The rise of every supercity was at its core a hydrological event. This perspective forces a fundamental shift in how we understand history. We have to stop seeing these civilizations as isolated kingdoms defined by territory and start seeing them as integrated systems. In this fluid model, the environment, technology, the economy, and the political structure were not separate categories. They were all bound together, circulating around a single, vital medium. Water was the connector. It was the reason a farmer planted his seeds, the force that powered a mill, the highway that brought goods to market, and the justification a king used to collect taxes and command an army. Control over this flow, the literal and metaphorical current of life, was the ultimate prize. This holistic view reveals both the staggering brilliance and the profound fragility of these urban experiments. It shows us that their power was not rooted in the soil, but in their ability to command the river, and their collapses were not just military defeats, but systemic failures of a delicate, water-dependent machine. This synthesized understanding of our past, where every channel and canal tells a story of interconnected human ambition, provides the clearest lens through which to view our own future. The silent, flowing networks of rivers and canals were the true architects of the ancient world's greatest cities. They were not just passive neighbors to human ambition, but active participants in building the very framework of civilization. From the hidden Qanats of Persia to the vibrant Chinampas of Tenochtitlan, a single, powerful pattern emerges time and again. Civilization follows water, and power follows its control. These hidden infrastructures were the lifeblood of empires, circulating not just water, but wealth, soldiers, and ideas. They were the engines of their economies, transforming seasonal floods into permanent abundance and barren plains into kingdoms of grain. Yet this very dependence was their greatest vulnerability. A single drought could starve a metropolis, a diverted river could end a war, and a salted field could erase an empire from the map. As we now face our own global water challenges, from dwindling aquifers to political battles over rivers, the lessons from these ancient supercities are more vital than ever. They remind us that our future, like their past, is inextricably tied to this most precious resource. The next time you see a river flowing through your city or a reservoir gleaming in the sun, look at it with new eyes. What stories of power and ingenuity does it hold? What hidden networks sustain your own world? I would love to hear your thoughts. Share any local water mysteries you know of in the comments below. And if you want to continue unraveling the deep secrets of our past, be sure to subscribe.